Good evening, guys. In the last session, we discussed about what is multi-threading, what is single tasking, and what is multitasking. Single tasking means performing only one task at a time is called as single tasking. What is multitasking? Performing multiple tasks at a time is called as multitasking. Multitasking is divided into two types. One is process-based multitasking. Second one is thread-based multitasking. Okay. In the Java, we have support for thread-based multitasking. For that, we are using multi-threading. What is the main aim of multi-threading? Multi-threading is used to execute programs parallelly. Okay, a program can have multiple logics. By using this multi-threading, we can execute those logics parallelly. Okay, here in the Java, by default, JVM is creating one thread to run our program. That thread is called main thread. Thread dot current thread will give the information about the default thread which is creating by JVM. So when we go for a Java program, we can get the information of the default thread by using thread class. Thread is one predefined class available in the Java in java.lang package. So our program is getting executed from the main method. To execute that program, JVM is creating one thread that is called main thread. How to get that main thread? Thread dot current thread is the method which will give the thread which is running in our program. So that thread once you got, you can get the name of that thread also. That thread name will be available as main thread. Main thread. Okay. So when I run that program, we can see that thread name is coming as main thread. Thread dot current thread. Thread dot get name. So every thread will have a group, every thread will have a name, every thread will have a priority. Got it? How to print all the details of the thread? Now here system.out.println, what is the name of the thread? For that we can go for current thread dot get name system.out.println thread group current thread dot get thread group system.out.println priority. What is the priority of the thread? That is current thread dot get priority. Every thread will have a name, every thread will have a group and priority. Let's run this. The name is main, the group is also a main, and priority is default 5. So JVM is creating one thread in order to run our application. JVM is creating one thread to run our application. That thread is called as main thread. That thread is called as main thread. Okay. So every thread will have a name, will have a group, will have a priority. How to get the information of the thread? Current thread dot get name dot get thread group dot get priority. It will give information about the thread. It will give information about the thread. Then after we have seen how to create our own thread in the Java to run our tasks parallelly. Whatever the work that I want to do programmatically, I want to do that work parallelly. So now there you need to create user defined threads. In Java, we can create the thread in two ways. One is by extending thread class. Second one is by implementing runnable interface. In Java, we can create thread in two ways. One is by extending thread class. Second one is by implementing runnable interface. Okay. Now here we are able to create the thread by extending thread class. So if you are extending the properties from the thread class, then what we need to do? Whatever the logic you want to execute by the thread, that method we will write as a run method. System.out.println run method called. Run method called. Public void run method. So my class is extending the properties from thread class and I am writing run method. Sir, what is this run method? Run method contains the logic which should be executed by the thread. Run method will contain the logic which should be executed by the thread. Now I created object for a demo. Demo D is equal to new demo. Now I want to represent demo as a thread. For that I will go for thread T is equal to new thread of demo. Thread dot start. Demo D is equal to new demo. Thread T is equal to new thread of T. Then T dot start. What is the meaning of T dot start? T dot start means starting the thread. T dot start means starting the thread. Whenever we call start method, then thread will start. That thread will execute run method internally. So here, this is one way to create the thread by extending the properties from thread class. So this is what we have done in the last session, creating a thread by extending the properties from thread class. Creating a thread by extending the properties from thread class. Similarly, we can go for another approach, implements runnable. We can go for another approach, implements runnable. Got it? Now, instead of extending the properties from the thread class, we can implement runnable interface also to create the thread. The output will be same. Run this. Yes, my program is started. Internally, it is calling run method. What is this runnable? Runnable is a interface which contains only one abstract method called run method. Runnable is a functional interface which contains only one abstract method, that is the run method. When we implement runnable interface, we need to override run method. What is this run method? Run method is a thread method. Run method will be called by the thread internally. Whatever the logic you want to execute by the thread, that logic you can keep inside the run method. Runnable interface. This is another approach to create a thread. This is another approach to create a thread. Java program to create a thread, to create the thread using runnable interface. Using runnable interface. Now, in the interview, they will ask a question. You can create the thread by extending the properties from thread class. You can create a thread by implementing runnable interface. Which is the best approach? Can you guys guess this? Can you guys tell me what is the difference between extending from thread class and implementing runnable interface? Which one is recommended? So here, if you go to here, what is the difference between extending thread class and implementing runnable interface? Which is recommended? What is the difference between extending thread class and implementing runnable interface? Which is recommended? Can you guys guess and tell me? Can you guys tell me? In both ways, we can create a thread. A thread can be created by extending the properties from thread class or by implementing. A thread can be created by extending the properties from thread class by implementing runnable interface. Which is the recommended approach? Which is the recommended approach? Which is the recommended approach? Which is the recommended approach, guys? Implementing runnable interface is recommended. If we extend properties from thread class, if we extend properties from thread class, we cannot extend properties from any other class because Java does not support multiple inheritance. If your class is extending the properties from thread class, our class cannot extend properties from any other class because Java does not support multiple inheritance. If we implement runnable interface, then in future we can extend properties from any class based on requirement. Here, if we extend properties from thread class, we cannot extend properties from any other class because Java does not support multiple inheritance. If we implement runnable interface, then in future, we can extend properties from any class based on the requirement. Here, we are closing a gate for inheritance. When you extend the properties from thread class, we are closing the gate for inheritance. Our gate is open for inheritance. Now tell me, which approach is recommended to create the thread? Which approach is recommended to create the thread? How many ways to create the thread now? There are two ways to create the thread. One is by extending thread class. Another one is by implementing runnable interface. Which one is recommended? If we extend properties from thread class, then we cannot extend properties from any other class because Java does not support multiple inheritance. We are closing the gate for inheritance for our class. If we implement runnable interface, then in future, we can extend properties from any class based on the requirement. Our gate is open for inheritance. So in the Java, we have a default thread and we can create the user defined threads also. When you run the Java program, JVM will create a default thread called main thread, which is used to run our Java program. Based on the requirement in the project, we can create our own threads also. The thread that we are creating in our program is called user defined thread. We can create user defined thread in two ways: by extending thread class, by implementing runnable interface. By extending thread class and by implementing runnable interface. In both ways, we are overriding the run method. What is run method? Run method is going to execute the thread logic. Whichever the logic you want to execute by the thread, that logic we are going to keep inside the run method. What is the difference between extending thread class and implementing runnable interface? If you extend the properties from thread class, we are closing the gate for inheritance. If you implement runnable interface, then you can extend the properties from any other class in future if required. Got it. The next one, what is thread scheduler? What is thread scheduler? Thread scheduler is a program in the JVM which is responsible to schedule the threads for the execution. What is thread scheduler? Thread scheduler is a program in the JVM which is responsible to schedule threads execution. Whenever you start a thread, that a thread requires some resources, those resources allocation will be taken care by thread scheduler. Thread scheduler is a program in the JVM which is responsible to schedule threads execution and resources allocation required for the thread. Resources allocation required. Resources allocation which are required for thread, which are required for the thread execution. Right? Now, whenever I am calling start method, so the thread is going to start. Who is going to start the thread? Who is going to execute the thread? That's where thread scheduler comes into picture. What is a thread scheduler? Thread scheduler is a program in the JVM which is responsible to schedule thread execution and resource allocation required for the thread execution. If we want to execute a thread, some memory or some resources are required. Those resources will be allocated by thread scheduler, and the thread scheduler is going to execute the thread. Thread scheduler is going to execute the thread. When we call start method, then thread scheduler will start its operation. When we call thread.start method, when we call start method, then thread scheduler will start. Thread scheduler will start its operation, allocating the resources, scheduling the thread, and executing the thread. What are those? Allocating the resources, when we call the start method, then thread scheduler will start its operation. What operations that thread scheduler is going to do? It is going to allocate the resources, allocating resources, thread scheduling, thread schedule, thread execution scheduler, thread scheduling, thread schedule, and thread execution. Thread execution. So all these things related to thread execution will be taken care by thread scheduler. Thread scheduler is a program in the JVM which is responsible to schedule thread execution and resource allocation. When we call start method, then thread scheduler will start its operation, allocating resources, thread scheduling, and thread execution by calling run method. What is the difference between start method and run method? You see, I'm writing the logic inside the run method, but I am calling the start method. When I call the start method, you see, internally run method is called. When I call the start method, internally run method is called. What is the difference between start method and run method? Start method versus run method. Start versus run. Start versus run. What is the difference between start method and run method? So to start the execution of the thread, to start thread execution, we will call start method like this, t.start. To start a thread execution, we will call start method. Thread start. Thread execution will begin from thread start. Thread lifecycle will begin from start method. To start the thread execution, we will call start method. Start method will call run method internally. Start method will call run method internally. Start method will call run method internally. Inside run method, we will write the logic. Which should be executed by thread. Whatever the logic you want to execute by the thread, that logic we are going to write inside the run method. But we don't call the run method directly. Whatever the logic that should be executed by the thread, that logic we are writing inside the run method. But to start the thread, we are going to call the start method. We are going to call the start method. Are you guys clear with my point? Now, here thread T is equal to new thread and T dot start. Whenever I call the start method, thread scheduler is going to start. What is thread scheduler? Thread scheduler is a program in the JVM which is responsible to schedule threads execution and resources allocation required for the thread. Okay. Now, when we call start method, then thread scheduler will start its operation, allocating the resources, thread scheduling, thread execution by calling run method. Sir, here we have start method and run method. What is that start method and run method? To start the thread execution, we will call start method, t dot start. Start method will call run method internally. Inside run method, we will write the logic which should be executed by the thread. Start method will call internally run method. To start thread execution, we will call start method. Once start method is called, then thread scheduler will comes into picture. Thread scheduler will come into picture to execute our thread. Start method will internally call run method. Inside the run method, we will write the logic which should be executed by the thread. That means when you call the start method, thread scheduler will understand what is the priority of the thread, how much memory is required, everything will be allocated for that thread. Then it is going to start the thread. Once the thread is started, internally it will call run method. Can we call run method directly? Now here I'm calling start method. You see demo d is equal to new demo. Demo object I am passing to thread object, thread of d. Demo object is created. Demo object I am passing to thread object t dot start. When I call the start method, you see run method called. That means internally run method called. Now instead of calling this start method, can I directly call the run method? Instead of calling the start method, can I directly call the run method? Yes, but that method will execute like a normal method. It is not like a thread method. If you call the run method directly, this run method will execute like a normal method. This run method will not execute like a thread method. This is also one interview question. If I want to execute the thread logic, I will write the logic in the run method now. Can I directly call that run method instead of calling the start method? That question they will ask. You can call the run method directly, but this run method will execute like a normal method. This run method will not execute like a thread method. In this program, there is no thread. Run method is executing like a normal method. If you want to execute the run method through thread, then instead of calling the run method, you need to call the start method. Whenever you call the start method, thread scheduler will come. It will identify your thread priority. It will allocate the resources for your thread. Then it is going to start your thread. Then your thread start will internally call the run method. That is the official process. If you directly call the run method, there is no use. Run method will execute like a normal method, not like a thread method. So to start the thread, you need to call the start method, not the run method. If you call the run method, this method will execute like a normal method. This method will not execute like a thread method. Are you guys clear with my point? Can we call run method directly without calling start method? Can we call run method directly without calling start method? Guys, are you clear with my point? Can we call run method without calling start method? Yes, we can call run method directly, but it will execute like a normal method. Yes, we can call run method directly, but it will execute like a normal method. Yes, we can call run method. Yes, we can call run method directly. Yes, we can call run method directly, but it will execute like a normal method. If you want to execute run method as a thread method, if we want to execute, if we want to execute run method as a thread based method, as a thread logic method, then we should call start method. We should call start method, then internally it will call run method. Internally it will call run method. So to start the thread, we need to call the start method. When you call the start method, thread scheduler will come. It will check the priority. It will schedule the execution. It will allocate the resources also which are required for the thread. Then thread start method will internally call the run method. If you call the run method directly, it will execute like a normal method. Can we call run method directly without calling start method? Yes, we can call run method directly, but it will execute like a normal method. There is no use. There is no use. If we want to execute run method as a thread logic method, then we should call start method. Then internally it will call a run method. Thread scheduler will take care of the execution. Thread scheduler will take care of thread execution. Yes, guys. So what is the difference between thread class extending and runnable interface implementation? We can create the user defined thread in two ways. One is by extending thread class. Second one is by implementing runnable interface. In both approaches, in both approaches, we can create user defined thread. Implementing runnable interface is always recommended. Implementing runnable interface is always recommended because if you extend the properties from thread class, you cannot extend the properties from any other class in future. So if you implement runnable interface in future also, you can extend the properties from some other classes. That's why implementing runnable interface is always recommended. What is a thread scheduler? Thread scheduler is a program in the JVM which is responsible for responsible to schedule threads execution and resources allocation required for the thread. When we call the start method, then thread scheduler will start its operation, allocating the resources, thread scheduling, thread execution by calling run method. So here we are dealing with two methods. One is a start method, another one is run method. Inside the run method, we are writing the logic. Run method should contain the logic which should be executed by the thread. We are using multi-threading. That means we are creating multiple threads. We are creating multiple threads to run our program parallelly. In my program, several logics are available. Those logics I want to execute parallelly. To execute those logics parallelly, we are going for multi-threading. So here I'm implementing runnable interface. I want to start a thread. That a thread should call my logic. That thread should execute my logic. The logic which you want to execute by the thread, that logic you need to keep inside the run method. Run method is the abstract method available in the runnable interface. We are implementing the interface and we are overriding the method. Inside that method, we are writing the logic which we want to execute by the thread. Then I'm creating a thread class object and I'm calling the start method. So here demo class object I created, then thread class object I created. Demo class object I am passing as the input for thread class object so that my demo class will represent as a thread class. Once it is represented, then I am calling start method. When I call the start method, what is happening? Thread scheduler will start, will understand my thread priority, will allocate the resources required for my thread, and it is going to schedule my thread execution. So once my thread execution is started, after allocating all the resources, that start method will internally call the run method. This run method will contain the logic which are required for my thread. So whatever the resources are allocated by the thread scheduler to execute my thread, the resources cleanup activity also will be taken care by thread scheduler. We no need to allocate the resources and we no need to deallocate the resources of the thread. We no need to allocate the resources and we no need to reallocate the resources. Why? Because that resource allocation will be taken care by thread scheduler. Resource allocation, resource deallocation for the thread will be taken care by my thread scheduler. The threads will share the resources. You can create multiple threads in the JVM. Multiple threads will share the same resources. Multiple threads will share the same resources. Now, start method we are calling. Internally, that start method is calling the run method. What is the difference between start method and run method? Start method is used to start the thread. Run method is used to execute the thread logic. Start method is used to start the thread. Run method is used to execute the thread logic. Sir, instead of calling the start method, can we call the run method directly? Yes, we can call the run method directly, but it will execute like a normal method. There is no use of multi-threading. Writing a run method, calling the run method, that means there is no use of going for threading when you are calling the run method directly. There is no use of calling the run method directly. Are you guys clear with my point? Can I show the difference between calling the start method and calling the run method? Yeah. Run method started, run method ended. Here I will write thread T is equal to thread dot current thread. System dot out dot println T dot get name. Now see here, run method started, run method ended. Which thread executed that run method, guys? Which thread executed that run method? Main thread executed the run method or user defined thread executed that run method? Main thread executed the run method or user defined thread executed the run method. Can you see the output? What is the name of the thread I'm printing? I'm getting the current thread and I'm printing the name of the current thread. I'm getting the current thread and I'm printing the name of the current thread. So which thread executed that run method? My thread executed or main thread executed? My thread is executing that method or thread 0. My thread name is thread 0. My thread executing the run method or main thread executing the run method? Who is executing that run method? When I call the start method, run method is called. Who called that run method? Thread 0 means my thread. Thread 0 means my thread. Our thread is executing. Our thread is executing. Okay. Are you able to understand the output? I'm calling T dot start. What is the meaning of T dot start? T dot start means we are starting the thread. When I start the thread, that means my thread is started. My thread is started. So my thread name is thread 0 by default. My thread is started. That thread is calling the run method. So in this program, two threads are executing. One is main thread given by the JVM. Another one is our user defined thread. So run method is executing by main thread or run method is executed by user defined thread. Run method is executed by main thread or run method is executed by user defined thread. Here main thread started, main thread is executing the main method. Inside the main method, I'm creating the object for the thread and I'm calling the start method. So here user defined thread is created, user defined thread is started, that user defined thread is calling the run method. That's why when I call the current thread, I'm getting the thread name as a thread 0. I'm getting the thread name as a thread 0. That means that run method is called by our user defined thread. Run method called by user defined thread. Observe the output. Run method started, thread of 0, run method ended. Now, instead of calling the start method, if I call the run method directly, now see what will happen if I call the run method directly. If I call the run method directly, what is the thread name we are getting inside the run method? Main thread. So run method is executing by user defined thread, or run method is executing by the main thread as a normal method. Run method is executing as a normal method by the main thread. So now you understand what is the difference between calling the start method and calling the run method. What is the difference between calling the start method and run method? You see, if I call this start method, see the output. If I call the start method inside the run method, what is the thread name it is printing? It is printing thread name as a thread 0. What is that thread 0? Here I created one user defined thread, that a thread name coming as thread 0. It is saying that the current thread is a thread 0 which executed this run method. If I don't call the start method, if I directly call the run method, what is happening? It is printing thread name as a main. That means run method is executing like a normal method. It is not executing like a thread method. So tell me, you need to call the start method or you need to call the run method? To execute your thread logic, you need to call the start method or you need to call the run method? You need to call the start method. What is the meaning of calling the start method? When we call the start method will call the run method internally as a thread method. If you directly call the run method, that run method will execute like a normal method. It will not execute like your thread method. To start the thread, you will call the start method. That start method will internally call the run method. If you directly call the run method will execute like a normal method. Run method will execute like a normal method. Are you guys clear? Are you guys clear with start method versus run method? Start method versus run method. Are you guys clear with this process? What is the difference between extending thread class and implementing runnable interface, and which is recommended? What is the difference between extending thread class and implementing runnable interface, which is recommended? You can create user defined threads in two ways. One is by extending thread class, another one is by implementing runnable interface. If you extend the properties from thread class, you cannot extend the properties from any other class in the future. So that's why implementing runnable interface is recommended. Your gate will be open for inheritance if you implement runnable interface. Then what is a thread scheduler? Thread scheduler is a program in the JVM which is responsible to schedule threads execution and resource allocation. So here we have a start method and we have a run method. To start the thread execution, we will call start method t.start. Once a start method is called, then thread scheduler will come into picture to execute our thread. Start method will call run method internally. Inside run method, we will write the logic which should be executed by the thread. Inside the run method, we will write the logic which should be executed by the thread. Can we call run method directly without calling start method? Yes, we can call run method directly, but it will execute like a normal method. by main thread. If we want to execute run method as a thread method, then we should call start method, then internally it will call run method. So this program will demonstrate what is the output. If you call the start method, what is the output? If we call the run method, what is the output? If we call the start method, then run method will be executed by our user defined thread. If we call run method, then run method will be executed by main thread. If we call start method, then run method will be executed by our user defined thread. We can see the thread name. We can see thread name as thread 0, user defined thread. If we call run method, then run method will be executed by main thread. We can see thread name as main. That output will be different. You see, inside the run method, I'm getting the current thread and I'm printing the name of the current thread. Here I'm getting the current thread and I'm printing the name of the current thread. When I call the start method, it is starting the thread. Run method is called. That thread name it is printing as thread 0. That means it is my user defined thread. If I don't call the start method, if I call the run method and if I execute this, it is printing the thread name as a main. That means run method is executing like a normal method. Understand? Look at the program. My class is implementing runnable interface and I am writing run method. My class is implementing runnable interface. I am overriding run method. Able to understand? Someone is asking, sir, how start method, run method are related internally? So that is a default JVM implementation. When you call the start method, internally it will call the run method. That is a JVM internal functionality. Okay. That is internal JVM functionality. Whenever you call the start, method, internally it will be calling the run method. Next one. What is thread life cycle? Guys, so software development life cycle. Initially, we discussed what is a software development life cycle, how a project is going to start, how a project is going to complete. That is called as software development life cycle. Project requirements we are going to gather, we are going to analyze the requirements, we will develop, we will test, we will deploy, and we will deliver. Similarly, humans also have a life cycle. Birth to death is our life cycle. Birth to death is our life cycle. Project development life cycle is available. How to develop a project and how to deliver a project. For that, we are going to follow a life cycle that is called project development life cycle. Humans also have a life cycle. Birth to death is called our humans life cycle. Similarly, thread also have a life cycle. Thread life cycle contains several phases of thread execution. Thread life cycle contains several phases of thread execution. Thread lifecycle contains several phases of thread execution. Sir, what are the thread lifecycle phases? New state will be available. New state will be available. Runnable state will be available. Running state will be available. Blocked state will be available for the thread, and terminated state also will be available. And terminated status also will be available. Thread lifecycle contains several phases of thread execution: new, runnable, running, blocked, terminated. New, a thread begins its life cycle in the new state. Okay, thread lifecycle contains several phases of thread execution. How humans are having a life cycle, similarly thread is also having a life cycle. So when we are working with multi-threading, we are creating our threads and the thread is executing our logic. Internally, JVM is creating one thread to execute our program. That thread is called as main thread. Internally, JVM is creating one thread. That thread is called main thread. That main thread is running our main method. 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 Now, along with this, we are creating our own threads and we are running the thread. So what is the life cycle that thread is following internally? Thread life cycle contains several phases of thread execution: new, runnable, running, blocked, terminated. What is the new? New means a thread begins its life cycle state. New, a thread begins its life cycle in the new state. That means new, that is a brand new thread that we have created. A thread begins its life cycle in the new state. So this is thread new state. We just created a thread object. We have not started the thread. Okay, whenever you create a thread object, that means that thread is available in the new state. A thread begins its life cycle in the new state. It remains in the new state until we call start method. Thread remains in the new state. Thread remains in the new state until we call start method. When you create a thread object, that means the thread object means thread is created, that a thread is available in the new state. A thread begins its life cycle in the new state. Thread remains in the new state until we call start method. runnable. What is a runnable state? When we call in start method on the new thread, thread becomes runnable. Runnable means ready to start, ready to execute, ready to execute, ready to execute. After calling start method, thread comes from new to runnable state. New to runnable state. From new state to runnable state. From new state to runnable state. Here, thread will go to runnable state. Whenever you create the thread object, that thread will be available in the new state. Once you call the start method, then thread will change from new state to runnable state. New state to runnable state. So once we start the thread, it will move from new state to runnable state. Then running state. A thread comes to running state. A thread comes to running state. Running state. A thread comes to running state when thread scheduler will pick up that thread for execution. Initially, it will be in the new state. From the new state, it will come to runnable state. From the runnable state, it will come to running state. What is the new state? New means a new thread created by creating the object for the thread. A thread begins its life cycle in the new state. Thread remains in the new state until we call the start method. Then what is runnable? On the thread object, when we call the start method, after calling the start method, thread comes from new state to runnable state. Then what is running? A thread comes to running state when thread scheduler will pick up that thread for execution. Will pick up that thread for execution. Then waiting. What is waiting state? What is the waiting state? Waiting state, or we can say it is sleeping state. A thread moves to waiting state when we call sleep method. When we call sleep method. A thread moves to waiting or sleeping state when we call sleep method. Okay, waiting. What is the waiting? A thread is waiting state if it waits for another thread to perform a task. A thread moves to waiting state when it wants other thread to complete the task. So a thread is in waiting state. A thread is in waiting state if it waits for another thread to complete its task. Okay guys, next one, terminated. A thread enter the terminated when it completes the task. A thread enters into terminated state once it completes its task. Once the thread task got completed, thread will move from running state to terminated state. What is the meaning of terminated state? Terminated state means is the thread execution got completed, thread process got completed, then thread will go to terminated state. Terminated status is nothing but a dead state. Terminated status is nothing but a dead state. What is the thread life cycle? Thread life cycle contains several phases of thread execution. New state, runnable state, running state, blocked state, terminated. A thread begins its life cycle in the new state. Thread remains in the new state until we call start method. Runnable. After calling start method, thread comes from new state to runnable state. A thread comes to running state when thread scheduler pick up that thread for execution. Waiting. A thread is in waiting state if it waits for another thread to complete its task. Okay, guys. What is terminated? Terminated status means a thread got dead. A thread it's completed the task, then thread will go to terminated state. You can see several diagrams also in the internet for thread life cycle. Thread life cycle images. Yeah, you can see initially the thread is in the new. From the new state, it is going to runnable. When it will go to runnable, whenever the thread is in the new state, when we call start method, from runnable, it will go to, from new to it will go to runnable, then run method. If you call sleep method, thread will block its execution. Once that sleep is completed, thread will get terminated. Start method, run method, and sleep method. So initially, when we create the thread, that thread will be available in the new state. On the new thread, if you call start method, thread will move from new state to runnable state. When thread scheduler pick up the thread for execution, internally, the thread scheduler will allocate the resources required for the thread and it will execute the thread. Then the start method will call the run method internally. Run method will contain the logic to execute by the thread. Once the run method is called, thread will move from runnable state to running state. When the thread is executing, we can stop the thread for some time by calling sleep method. My thread is executing. My thread should wait for another thread to complete the task. Then we will go for sleep method. When we call the sleep method on the running thread, that thread will block its execution for some time. After that sleep time is completed, thread will come back to running state. Once its task is completed, then thread will go to terminated state. Now let us see how we are going to call this run method. Are we calling the run method directly or we are calling the start method? Guys, are we calling the run method directly or we are calling the start method? Okay, we are calling the start method. Why not run method? Why we are not calling run method directly? Why we are calling only start method? Why we are not calling run method? Why we are calling the start method? Come on, guys. Can you tell me? Why we are not calling run method? Why we are calling only start method? If we call run method, it will behave like a normal method. Okay. If you call the start method, thread scheduler will process our thread. If we call the start method, thread scheduler will prepare our thread execution. Understand my point? Good. Now, okay. I want to stop this thread for some time. Sleep. I'm keeping 5000 milliseconds. Okay. Sleep method is giving a exception. So let me surround with the try catch block. Can you see the output now? Run method started, waiting, 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 completed. So when I run this program, run method completing its execution immediately, or run method is waiting for 5 seconds to complete the execution. See here, run method started, thread.sleep. What is the meaning of thread.sleep? It will go to blocked state. It will go to blocked state. Here, I'm creating a thread. Thread will go to new state. That means a new thread is created. On the new thread, I'm calling the start method. Then it will go to runnable state. Then it will go to runnable state. Once we call the start method, thread scheduler will start the execution of the thread. Thread scheduler will allocate the resources, will process the thread execution. When the thread execution is started, start method is calling the run method. Then thread is entering into running state. When the thread is in the running state, I'm calling thread.sleep blocked state. So here thread.sleep, I want this thread to wait for 5 seconds. Okay. Once this entered into the method, I want this thread to wait for 5 seconds. I want this thread to wait for 5 seconds. Then when you call thread.sleep or 5000 milliseconds, 1000 milliseconds is equal to 1 second. I'm giving 5000 milliseconds. It is equal to 5 seconds. So after printing this statement, it will take 5 seconds to print this statement, because in between my thread is going to sleeping state for 5000 milliseconds. Check this. Run method started. Then run method completed. 5 seconds gap is there. If I make this as a 15,000 seconds, 15,000 milliseconds, my thread will wait for 15 seconds to complete the execution. That is the power of sleep. Thread.sleep. So how much time you will give for sleep method? That a thread will be in the blocked state till that time got completed. Once that time is completed, then thread will continue its execution, and then finally thread will go to terminated state. So thread is having a life cycle: new, runnable, running, blocked, from blocked to running, then finally terminated. So what is the purpose of sleep method? Can you guys tell me what is the purpose of thread.sleep method? What is the purpose of thread.sleep method? What is the purpose of thread.sleep method? Can anyone tell me? If you want to stop your thread execution for some time, if you want to stop your thread execution for some time, if you want to stop your thread execution for some time, then you can go for sleep method, thread.sleep. Whenever you give some time for the sleep method, that thread will be blocked that execution for the given amount of time. Once the given amount of time is completed, then finally it will come to running state. Once this thread logic got completed, once this run method execution got completed, then thread scheduler will terminate our thread. That is called a terminated state, or we can call it as a dead state. New, runnable, running, blocked, terminated. New, runnable, running, blocked, terminated. Or waiting state, or blocked state. Okay, so here thread program, thread Java program on thread sleep, Java program on thread sleep, thread.sleep. If you give 5000, then 5000, these 5000 is milliseconds. 1000 milliseconds is equal to 1 second. When you give 5000, it will become 5 seconds. So the above run method thread execution will wait for 5 seconds of time. Run method started, it will go to blocked state for 5 seconds, then it will continue its execution, then thread will go to terminated state. Now here I am going to create multiple threads. Thread T1 is equal to new thread T2, T3. I'm creating multiple threads, guys. Okay, I'm creating multiple threads. T1 dot start, T1 dot start, T2 dot start, T3 dot start, T1, T2, T3, T1, T2, T3. Multiple threads we are going to start. Sir, can we create multiple threads to execute the same program? Yes, multiple threads will perform the action. Now, all the threads are going to call our run method. See, 3 threads call the run method. Those 3 threads are waiting. 15,000 milliseconds I have given. See, run method started, run method started, run method started. 3 threads are waiting. After waiting, then run method ended. Run method ended. Okay, run method started, run method ended. But when I run this program, how many threads I have created? Thread T1, thread T2, thread 3, T3, T1 dot start, T2 dot start, T3 dot start. I have created 3 threads and I am running the 3 threads. When I click on run, my program is started from the main method. Inside the main method, I created 3 threads. I have started the 3 threads. When I start the 3 threads, they are calling the run method internally. Inside the run method, we are having a sleep method. So the threads are waiting. So once the given time is completed, then threads will complete its execution. Threads will complete its execution, creating multiple threads. Java program to start multiple threads to perform same activity. Java program to start multiple threads to perform same activity. 3 threads are calling the run method. I have a thread class. Inside the thread class, I am writing a run method. What is run method? Run method is used to write the logic which should be executed by the thread. Run method contains the logic which should be executed by the thread. I'm creating thread object T1, T2, T3. 3 threads I have created. I have started all the 3 threads. T1 dot start, T2 dot start, T3 dot start. What is the meaning of T1 start? First thread started. T2 dot start, second thread started. T3 dot start, third thread is started. When I start the 3 threads, those 3 threads are going to pick up by thread scheduler. Thread scheduler will prioritize the threads. Okay, can we print the name of the thread now? Run method started plus thread dot current thread dot get name. Okay, I'm printing the name of the thread. I'm printing the name of the thread. Which thread started first? Which thread ended first? See, thread 1, thread 2, thread 0. Method started, thread 1, thread 2, thread 0. Ending, can you check the ending? They are waiting. Yes. Guys, the order is the same. In which order they have started, in the same order they are ending, or order is not guaranteed. Order is the same. In which order they have started, in which order they have started, are they ending in the same order? Are they, whatever the order my threads are started? How many threads I have started in my program? Can you tell me how many threads I have started in my program? How many threads I have started in my program? Come on, guys. How many threads I have started in my program? 3 threads. Okay. Can I give the name for the threads also? Yes. T1 dot set name. This is thread 1. I'm setting the name for the thread, guys. Thread 1. I'm setting the name for the threads. Thread 2. Thread 2. T1 dot set name. T2 dot set name. T3 dot set name. You see, T1 dot set name, T2 dot set name, T3 dot set name. 3 threads. Run this. Run method. First thread, third thread, then second thread. Ending. Can you check the ending? Can you check the ending? Okay. First thread completed first. Second thread completed second. Third thread completed third. But actually, after first thread, third thread started. So, can you guarantee the order of thread execution? 132 start order, 123 end order. So start order and end order both are same or both are not same? Start order and end order both are same, both are not same, both are not same. Who will take care of this thread execution? As a programmer, can I control the execution? Who will control? Thread scheduler. Who will control this thread order, thread execution? Thread scheduler. Here, for threads, we can set the priority also. For the threads, we can set the priority also. T1 dot set priority. I'm setting the priority as 10. Then T2 dot set priority. I'm setting as 20. T3 dot set priority. I'm setting as 30. Okay. In which order these threads should execute? 10 priority, 20 priority, 30 priority. See here, it failed. Illegal argument exception. Illegal argument exception. When I set the thread priority 10, 20, 30, it is failing. It is failing. Can anyone guess what is the reason for this failure? Can anyone guess what is the reason for the failure? What is the reason for the failure? Thread priority should be below 10. Thread priority 10, 20, 30 I have given. Instead of that, 10, 9, 8. Let me give like this. Now executed. 1, 2, 3. Now order 1, 2, 3. Order 1, 2, 3. Highest priority thread will get the first chance. highest priority thread will get the first chance, but ending start order 1 2 3, end order 1 3 2. Okay, here first thread having 10 priority, second thread having 9 priority, third thread is having 8 priority. Highest priority thread will get the first chance. But there is no guarantee. Thread scheduler is going to take care of that. Instead of giving thread like this, we can give thread dot max priority. What is the max priority? 10. A thread can have the maximum priority 0 to 10 only. We can give the max priority. Now here you can give thread dot normal priority. What is the normal priority? Normal priority is 5. Max priority is 10. Normal priority is 5. Then min priority. You can go for thread dot min priority. When you go for min priority, it is 1. So thread priority 1 to 10, you can give any number. Max priority means 10. Normal priority means 5. Minimum priority means 1. Okay. 1 2 3. 1 3 2. See, even if I give the priority, minimum priority I have given for thread 3, but it is starting in the second position. Even if you give the priority, thread scheduler may not consider. So even I have given 10 priority I have given for first thread. Normal priority I have given for second thread. Min priority I have given for last thread. But the order 1 3 2, least priority thread executed in the second position. So even if you set the priority, that is not final. Thread scheduler will decide the priority for the thread execution. Thread scheduler will decide the priority for the thread execution. So in the thread class, we have methods to set the priority to get the priority. We have the methods to set the name to get the name. We have the methods to set the priority, get the priority. We have methods to set the name and get the name, right? Here I created 3 threads. For every thread I'm setting the priority, I'm setting the name. Then I am starting 3 threads. When I start the 3 threads, each thread is going to call the run method. Inside the run method, I'm calling the sleep method. What is the meaning of sleep method? Keeping the thread in the holding state, sleep. Thread will sleep for some time. With the given sleep time is completed, then thread will come to running state. We'll start the thread execution. Once the thread execution is completed, finally thread will go to terminated state. Terminated state means a dead state. So this is thread life cycle. A thread lifecycle contains several phases of execution. New state will be available, runnable state will be available, running state will be available, blocked state will be available, terminated state. New, a thread begins its life cycle in the new state. Thread remains in the new state until we call start method. Runnable, after calling the start method, thread comes from new state to runnable state. A thread comes to running state when thread scheduler will pick up that thread for execution. Blocked state. A thread is in waiting state if it waits for another thread to complete its task. Terminated. A thread enters into terminated state once it completes its task. It is also called as a dead state. A Java program on the thread sleep. A thread is going in the sleep state. Okay. Java program to start multiple threads to perform the same activity. How you can understand which thread is executing first, which thread is executing next? For every thread, I am giving the name and I am giving the priority. So whenever you execute this program, it will tell you which thread started this method, which thread ended this method. So for each thread, run method we is going to call. I'm creating 3 threads. I'm starting the 3 threads. When I start the 3 threads, internally run method will be called. Which thread started? Run method started by. Run method started by. Run method ended by. Started by and ended by. We can understand clearly which thread is starting, which thread is ending that. Run method started by which thread? Run method ended by which thread? We can get the name of the thread. To get the name of the thread, we have thread dot current thread. Thread dot current thread. This method is a static method available in the thread class. Thread dot current thread method will give the currently thread which is running this method. Thread dot get name which will give the name of the thread. Here I am calling the get name method. Here I am calling the set name method. For the thread you can set the name, you can set the priority, and you can set the group also. Thread priority should be 1 to 10. 1 means minimum priority. 1 means minimum priority. 1 means minimum priority. Min priority is 1. Normal priority is 5. Max priority is 10. But when we set the priority, even if we set the priority also, we cannot guarantee the order of the threads. That thread execution order will be taken care by thread scheduler. Priority means we are sending a request for the thread scheduler to execute the highest priority thread first. But that thread scheduler may consider, may not consider our request based upon the resources availability. Thread scheduler may or may not consider our request based on resources availability to execute the threads. Got it, guys? Yeah, perfect. So please practice these programs that we discussed today, and tomorrow we will continue. Okay. Today we discussed about how to create user-defined threads and which is recommended approach, and what is a thread scheduler, and run method versus a start method. What will happen if you call run method directly, and what is thread lifecycle, and how to create multiple threads, and how to set the name for a thread, how to set the priority for the thread that we discussed in the today's session. We'll continue in the tomorrow session. I'm going to upload the class notes right now, so you can access the class notes in the portal. Please practice it before coming to tomorrow session. Sir, today and tomorrow Oracle classes are not available. Sari is also not feeling well like me, so he will continue from Wednesday. So today and tomorrow Oracle session is also not there because the trainer is not feeling well. You guys have next Oracle class on Wednesday. Okay, so please practice these thread programs. Thank you guys. Thank you. Good night.